Burleigh County Soil Conservation. So my job is to do a lot of outreach education within the urban communities, and this one really played into our favor quite well the last couple of years. A lot of you might have even been affected by this throughout different states, but it was probably one of the nastiest droughts we've had. So behind me is what we call a rain garden. Back up. So the function of this is it's all fed off our gutter system. When it rains, water comes off this roof and it comes off the backside as well. It's piped and it comes and it flows into the bottom. Into the bottom we have hydrophilic plants, so plants that really can stand water. On the average, if we get a good 1 inch, 2 inches of rain, there will be about probably 3-4 feet of water hanging out in the bottom of this for 2 to 3 days. So it's really slow to soak in, so we strategically put those natives in the bottom that can have wet feet. And then up top we have our hydrophobic plants. So those ones obviously can't stand and have wet feet. We really went with natives for this, and that's where it kind of comes in with the whole drought side of things. Natives are meant to be here. They were the first ones here. They can withstand it. So something like this is just a great opportunity for those folks in town that have Kentucky bluegrass lawns and they need a lot of maintenance, they need a lot of water to stay green. So we have things like this. On the outside, we added this last year, so we have 5 different species of grasses and forbs just to really impact our pollinator community. Because pollinators are kind of like us, right? You need food and a home, right? It's not just enough to have food, it's not just enough to have a home. You gotta have both. So that's why we added those grasses, because there's a lot of different insects that will actually nest within these native grasses. Just has a clay bottom in it, so it will infiltrate slowly. And then it actually, when we first did it, it was infiltrating too fast, so we went and added bentonite clay as well to slow it up. So we also have a rain catchment facility on the other side. We'll go over that a little bit later, but we have 1,500 gallon storage tanks on the other side of this building and on the back side of our shop there. So it's all plumbed together, and we actually utilize that to water our high tunnel, our outdoor garden, and our worm juice pad as well. So we try to use as much rainwater as we possibly can.
Okay. Last summer we planted from plugs. These are all native plants. We have bergamot right here, and this one's purple prairie clover. This one's a really pretty one, but the rabbits really like it too. Let's see, we have black Samson or echinacea, purple coneflower. It's got several different names. We have a meadow blazing star. I'm yet to see what color those flowers are going to be. And then we have smooth blue aster right here, which gets really long and leggy. And then we have some big blue stem. We have switchgrass. This one over here is kind of cool. It's side oats grama. If you notice, all the oats are on one side of the stem. We have little blue stem. And then we also have Indian grass. We're going to also see them down in the beetle bank. The Indian grass is already starting to head out. It's got a really pretty reddish brown color. But these have done amazingly well. Consider this is not a very good soil down there. The plants are bigger even, and they've done really well. Yeah, this has a gravel mulch, which we're not crazy about because it's just a little too warm for the plants. It's just too hot. There are other mulches you can use, even wood chips or anything like that. So, and then we put this black fabric on here just to get the plants established. Once they're established, then we're going to cut it off. And this black is just awful hot too, but it really helps with getting things established.
So it's a great question about what do you hope to do here? Well, we're trying to rebuild the landscape. It's always food and home. So how do you rebuild the landscape? And so here's an example of what you can do in your backyard, what a business place in town can do. We can bring in and create those habitats. Flowering plants bring insects, pollinators, insects bring birds. Next thing you know, you have life. And so without these plants, you don't have that. And then plus you have the water source. So it's just another example of what you can do, but this one leans into more the urban scenario. Yeah. And I think the plugs, Bob, were probably in the vicinity of $1. But we got to order them, 6 months or a year in advance. And then the nurseries put the plugs together for you. It's a great way to successfully establish the first year. Love that concept. Anyone here from Colorado? Yeah. Okay, so Colorado. So recently we had folks from Colorado come, and their concern is water, right? They can't get enough water. Yep. And so they're trying to take out urban scenarios that create a need for a huge amount of water and replace it with something that is adapted and functions in that ecosystem. Meaning something that would capture rainwater off of a roof or those type things, and only plants that are adapted, and we have a much more sustainable landscape. Yeah. So
very good.
We're blessed with a lot of water in North Dakota. I mean, a lot of surface water, and we're blessed with a lot of rain, a lot of snow. So, but that's not true across the nation, and so then it becomes real critical, right?
Right.
Real critical. Yeah. You know the old saying about whiskey and water. One was for fighting and one was for drinking. Right?
And also, are there any fruit bearing and stuff like that? And the answer is not all of them are native to North Dakota. There's a lot of them that aren't. North Dakota is, or this area is a prairie state. Trees are not the easiest thing to grow here with our pHs and rainfall and all of that. And then, so the other part of the question was fruit bearing. And there is a lot of fruit bearing in here. We are pretty blessed with having a lot of varieties that will provide fruit. And so the other benefit of having an arboretum is as the windbreak conservationist for Burleigh County, I can walk through here at any point in the year and see, on average when things are producing, when they're flowering, and for pollinators and all of that. So it's very good observation for me, and it's open to the public. I mean, people can come in here and look at that, so then they can figure that out on their own. But it's very beneficial, and I'm glad we have.
Here with the leaves, dark leaves.
Yep. So these are a Schubert chokecherry. So they're very 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 hardy. So a common chokecherry like that green one there, that'd be a common chokecherry, and then the Schubert variety is turns purple. It starts out green, and then at the end of June it turns that color. So. Yes, chokecherry edible. Yes.
Berries are the same between the two.
Yeah, pretty much same. Yeah. They say common choke usually produce a little bit more.
What about the evergreens? What are they?
Oh, these evergreens here are Colorado blue spruce. There's most of the trees in here. We'll get moving through here, and we'll just kind of take our time, and then we'll move to the opposite end over here. We'll end up over there. But most of them should be labeled. There should be labeled labels on each tree. I guess just a couple that are kind of neat is I think the elderberry on the end here is still flowering. There might be some dogwoods that are still flowering, and then also for evergreens, North Dakota does not have a lot of varieties that grow well here. One of the few of interest would be a larch, and so on the end down there you can kind of see one of the bigger evergreens there. Larch is one of the few evergreens, or maybe one of the only ones that actually lose their needles in the fall and then grow them back each year. So the needles on those are very soft. They're kind of something to look at of interest. So most of the trees should be labeled in here. So we'll move that direction. So this is the Burleigh County Soil Conservation District. This is the Arboretum. They were all the trees here were started as little seedlings from the nurseries. We get the trees from mainly two different nurseries, Lincoln Oaks Nursery, which is owned by the association, and Towner State Nursery for most of the evergreens. But it's very young. It was the churros to the south here. I think they're maybe 10 years old. The ones to our west here, those I think were planted 2010 to the
11, 12.
2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And then to the south here, this is where that's where the actual arboretum starts, where there's a lot of more variety, a little bit of everything in there. But I'll just mention that the arboretum is dedicated to Ken Miller. He was a friend of the farm, former employee, and a friend of conservation. So the district decided to dedicate the arboretum to him. So with that, a lot of variety in here. This is, I guess Seth talked a little bit about funding for the district, and one of the other avenues for that is tree planting. So it's Burley County has a successful program. I've been here probably about 7 years, and so one of the questions we always get is when producers are trying to pick a certain type of tree or shrub, you have a book, you have the internet, but the district thought it would be nice if they could physically come out here and look and see what they'll look like. So the arboretum to the north here, probably like after Dustin, that's Dustin Kruger there. And so he's standing by Velosa lilac shrub row, and then beyond that is basically every tree variety or shrub variety that the district offers for sale. And so it's just, it also offers a habitat for insects and birds and all that, but and is very diverse. And basically it starts out with the shrub rows and kind of gets to bigger shade trees, and then on the end there's evergreens. So we decided on this spot mainly because of the soil. It's very good soil, pretty good soil in here, so trees will do well. Nothing gets watered in here, no supplemental water besides rainwater. So this is, if a producer wants to plant field windbreak, shelter belt, pollinator planting, whatever, they can come out here and kind of have an idea of what theirs will look like in a certain amount of years. So I guess with that we can, if there's any questions, just yell it out or raise your hand or find me afterward and ask. But we can kind of move down here and we'll make one more stop. So one of the questions was asking about how to know what trees to pick for a site. And I guess I'll just mention that the Web Soil Survey is a good resource for looking up soils, and so all trees are matched or will do the best on certain soils. So like the spruce might not do as good as like a ponderosa pine or something like that. So that's the first thing we always look at when we're designing a site or picking trees is matching that tree to the proper soil. So like I mentioned earlier, that down here in this area where the arboretum is, it's pretty good soil, so a lot of different varieties will grow here, and that's why we picked it. And I guess for the same varieties, there might be, or the same tree, say a hackberry, we might have 3 varieties available to us. So so this is another good resource to say, what each variety will look like, in 10 years, what are the differences. You can read it in a book, but here you can actually visualize it and see it. The clay soils kind of get a little bit more towards the east there. This is a little bit higher ground, a little bit, it's all pretty good soil in here. And we also we'll play with a few varieties if it's something that we've had a lot of customers ask us about, and it's really not known to grow here. That's a nice thing about a demonstration farm, is we can kind of play with that, like maybe a northern pecan tree will grow out here or something like that, which is normally would not, but we've actually planted a few. Again, they're very young, but they've made it through the winter, so so we're a little bit hopeful on some of those varieties.
So this is kind of a quick glimpse into our grazing system out here at Menoken Farm. We call this our wetland pasture, and it's definitely probably our least performing pasture in the past in terms of weights, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit. So we have a scale here out at Menoken Farm, and we multi-species graze. We're bringing the livestock back onto our field, so we'll aftermath graze some of our crops. We graze some cover crops, and then we have a scale, and we'll walk by it when we're down by the beetle bank. I can make mention of it while we're down there. But having that scale has been wonderful for us because it gives us the opportunity to see how these critters are doing on different forages. So right now they're in our wetland, and historically this pasture has done either nothing or has gone backwards for us in terms of gains on these cattle, except for last year. We started to see not a lot of gains. I'm not talking some crazy gains, but we started to see a positive number coming out of this pasture. The kind of the way we graze out here is a mob grazing type system. We want to mimic what was here prior to us being here. So I don't know how many of you are as big as nerds as me and Jay probably are, but I spent some time reading the Lewis and Clark journals, right? And in those journals, they describe the landscape as they're coming through North Dakota. Saddle-high pastures, at a glance, thousands of animals, massive herds of animals, right? That's a lot different than what it's like now, right? And what was chasing those animals around? Wolves, lions, bears, predators, right? Well, we came in and we took care of those predators, and we became the predators. So what we're trying to do is mimic the way that the bison used to roam. You know, they were in massive herds being pushed around by these predators, and they might come in and they're going to graze down an area real hard, right? And then when do they come back to that area again? Is it in 6 months? Is it in a year? Is it in 2 years? We don't really know that, but we do know that they gave those areas of land plenty of rest and recovery. So we try to do that out here with daily moves. And you'll see it once we get out to field 2. That's a perennial perennial field we have in right now. We add perennials to our cropping system on a 5-year rotation. So you'll kind of be able to see what that looks like in our perennial daily moves. So it'll be high intensity, short duration, and then long rest and recovery, right? We want that plant to fully recover before we come in and nip it again. So that way you're building biomass above ground, but you're also building mass underground, right? Feeding that soil. So kind of back to this, I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but this year we actually got a solar charger. So I was able to divide it up a little tighter than I typically do. Usually we if we're lucky, we can go in half. This year we're trying it in thirds and hitting it a little harder. And I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen with the cattle. We've got one more move to go before they're weighed, and I'm really curious to see if we're going to see that positive bump again this year out of this, being that we kind of came out of 2 dry years and we're having more of a normal year this year in terms of moisture. So we're seeing some more species coming up in here. Kind of touching back again on the multi-species, as you can see, we have some yearling heifers out here, and then we also have some yearling sheep. The heifers, we do custom grazing for a local producer in the area. In the past, we did purchase our own, but we started to run into some issues in terms of some temperament things, and when we have people out here like this, we can't have cattle that get excited easy. So we've moved into the custom grazing realm, and it's been excellent for us. The sheep actually come out of Hettinger Research Station, NDSU Research Station. They're located on the west side of the state, and they have helped us supply sheep for the last few years, and their sheep have been quite exceptional as well. So it's kind of cool. What we do when we first get them is we'll have them in our holding pen, which is the same area where we have our scale, and we put them together and we feed them. We give them a little sweet feed. We feed them together. And right away, it's kind of funny. The yearlings will spend a good part of a day chasing those sheep around, right? Kind of bullying them into submission a little bit. But then the next day, the sheep are a little closer, and Jay's got some wonderful pictures out here. You'll actually see sometimes the sheep, they'll be all together in their flock, but inside the yearlings. The yearlings will be all around them, the sheep will be inside. You might come back the next day and they'll be in their own separate flocks on opposite corners of the field. And it's kind of cool what told those sheep to go inside those yearlings. You know, was there maybe a coyote running by that no one else is seeing? Is it you know, more of a trample type thing? We don't know. It's just kind of cool observation to see those things and the way they act together. I mean, you can kind of see now they're right amongst each other, and they're a really good combination to have together.
Got a question over there.
Yep.
What kind of breed of sheep are you running, and do you always run the same breed?
So what breed of sheep are we running? I believe they're Rambouillets, correct? They're Rambouillets from Hettinger Research Station, and as of now, yes, it's been the same every year, just because that's what they have and that's what they are willing to let us graze throughout the summer.
So Seth, you say you got one more move here. Do you just take the division fence down, or do you use a back fence to exclude them from where they've already grazed?
Right. So the question is, we got one more move here, and how do we do that in terms of fencing? So with this last move, we have a permanent fence on the other side. So I'll just open up the hot wire here, and then I'll put the hot wire back up so they can't come back. And you can, it might be hard to see, but right off the corner here is a hot fence, blocking them from getting back in the first little paddock they were in.
This is the second.
Right. But we do stop them from going back to their previous cell. One thing that I noticed, especially in our perennial, it's not anymore, but when we first grazed it, it was extremely tall. In a scenario like that, you could maybe leave that just the next back one open. The sheep get a little nervous going into that really tall grass where they can't see anything, and then they end up trampling quite a lot, which trample effect is great, but you're missing out on a little bit of stuff there too. Any other questions? Yep.
Is there anything you do specific to condition those heifers to stay together like that as opposed to spreading out?
No, I guess we don't do anything in terms of training or it's kind of, they just do it. They stick together as a unit, and I don't know if, because they're both sets of yearlings, if they the sheep mimic the cattle and the cattle mimic the sheep a little bit. We don't really know, but typically they're all together as a unit. They might spread out a little bit on a cooler day in the morning, or something like that, but typically they're kind of a solid unit. So
They're raised that way. We're pretty sure that they're raised that way, and so they develop tendencies that their mothers had and all that, and so they do that.
Are they red Angus?
they are red Angus. I saw a question over here.
So why do you attribute this to being one of the lowest producing flats? With it being wetland area, I would think that would mean your grass wouldn't be limited by moisture, so you'd have more production.
Right. So we're not limited by moisture, but the problem with it is there's a lot of aquatic species, and those aquatic species aren't typically really great in terms of forage quality or nutrition. Really high water content, so not a lot of dry matter, not a lot of they have to eat a lot of it to get what they would get if they were eating something a little drier.
So
really being bothered by flies. What's going on here with flies?
So, you know, as you can tell, okay, so the question is in say it, Iowa. In Iowa, she's having some issues with flies, and she's wondering what we do for flies here. We don't spray any sort of insecticide on. We don't drench them or anything like that. But this year we did do a little bit of experimenting with like a salt lick that has garlic in it. And we've actually seen, you can see they're still wagging their tails around. It's not going to kill the flies. It's not going to eliminate your fly issue, but we have seen that with the added garlic into their mineral, that it actually really decreased the amount of flies that are on them. So you're going to see it. There's still going to be flies around, but it made a huge difference adding the garlic.
We're gonna try that.
Yes, yeah, it's our first.
That's new to us.
It's our first year trying it, and we're going to continue to do it. So.
The dung beetle population looks strong.
Right. Right, and I don't know. We probably don't have time to walk out in there, but if you see a pad on the ground, it's full of holes, and fresh pads even. I'm talking day-old pads, even maybe some same-day pads, and you'll open them up, and the dung beetles, you just see them crawl everywhere. So I think with our lack of drenching for insecticides has greatly helped our dung beetle population as well. So we do see a lot of those benefits by not doing some of those conventional type things. The dung beetles seem to be okay with the garlic. Yeah, they kind of get some bad breath, but.
They're Italian.
Any more questions before we? I'm going to hand the microphone over to Jay here.
So just one quick comment. 2.7% dry weight is what they need, right, per day. So we usually figure 3% of their body weight. And I think really what you see happen when they get into this kind of wetland aquatic system like Seth just described, you end up where they have difficulty getting 2.7% dry weight because there's such a high percent of water in the plants. So it's a much more of a task for them because they have to have a certain amount of time to lay down and ruminate. And this is all part of their process of being a ruminant. And so that's all got to be built into their day. They got a hectic schedule. Eat, lay down, chew, eat, lay down, chew, eat, lay down, chew. It all takes time. So when they get up, around 1,000 pounds, you're talking right around 33%. So that's 30 pounds of dry weight a day. That's a lot of material. And they're going to select it. So, yeah. Any last questions for Seth here on this particular site? Fantastic.
So this is our vermicompost liquid extract pad and collection tank. I like to call it worm juice. I'm probably a little more hippie than some of you guys. So I like to call it worm juice. We started really small scale, and if you turn around, that's kind of our small scale where we started. It's just a little livestock tank that drains into a 5-gallon pail, and we use this. We started using it in the garden and then expanded it to all of our production fields. So kind of what you're seeing here is this is a cement slab, 120 foot long, 12 foot wide, 2% slope to the middle, 2% slope down to this tank here. What sits on top of that concrete pad is finished compost, which we have some almost finished compost next to it, just to give you a rough estimate of maybe what that might look like. And then on top of the compost is alfalfa hay. The reason we use alfalfa hay is because we think it maybe has a little bit of nutrient in it, it maybe has a little bit of growth hormone in it, and it doesn't tend to blow in the wind as straw might. So that kind of covers our compost. When we first did it, we used black fabric like you see here, but it was getting too hot, and the reason we can't have it too hot is because what we collect here at the end in this tank is a biological, and it doesn't have very much nutrient in it, but it does have a high, or we like to think it's high, amount of bacteria and fungi in it. Our last test was about, I don't know.
It's the wind.
Yeah, I suppose I got to stand this way.
The wind.
So our last mRDNA test out of Shallow Water, Texas, told us we had about 350 species of bacteria and fungi in this. Is that a lot? We don't know. It kind of sounds like a lot, but then when you think of probiotics and they say umpteen trillion, but so we don't know. And obviously our guts are going to be different than what comes out of this compost. But another reason we didn't want it getting so hot is because we seed this compost with worms, and that allows us. That's why we call it worm juice. And what that worm does is it breaks down that compost a little further, and then we get rain. Which this year we've been fortunate to get some rains. If we don't have rains, we do water it with our rainwater. But we get the compost wet, and then what leaches from that compost runs down into this tank, and then that's what we use in the garden, in the field. Typically, we do 4 gallons an acre in furrow. We don't know really the exact science to that. It's kind of just what we've come up with is 4 gallons in furrow. I've always been told that if you can only put it on once, if you only have enough to put it on one time, to put it down on the seed in furrow, that's the most important time to put it down. But then we follow it up through the growing season with 2 foliar applications. What we mix with our worm juice is it's primarily worm juice, and then we'll mix a little bit of fish emulsion in with it for our nutrient. So we got the workers, the nutrient, and then we mix a little bit of molasses in. That's the food, jump starts those bacteria, gets them going. And then we add also a little bit of mycorrhizal fungi spores, because this is predominantly of bacteria, right? You need a green plant usually to get fungus, and we do see it in here in terms of species or in terms of DNA, but it's predominantly bacteria. So we do add a little bit of mycorrhizal fungi spores to get the fungi aspect of it. So we've got workers, we've got food, and we give it a home out in the field. So.
And what purpose does the fabric here serve?
The purpose of this fabric here is it's nothing. It doesn't really serve a purpose other than it makes it look a little nicer. And then when we're walking around here, we're not tripping and sliding. And when it rains, it's not getting full of mud. It kind of just makes it cleaner to work around and work through.
Get tired of pulling the weeds.
Yes.
And you know, I found those big plastic tubes you can store drainage stuff in, black on one side, white on the other. That makes great stuff like that too, because it'll keep everything down, and otherwise it just gets burned up. So.
One thing I did forget to mention, in our compost here, we also have 4 drain tile lines running through the middle of it. That actually helps with aeration. We got to keep this aerobic. We cannot let it get anaerobic. You'll know when it's anaerobic, because if it was anaerobic and Jay took that lid off, you'd all be backing up about 50 yards right now. So I think I'm going to turn the mic over to Jay here and let him maybe tell you a little more about it.
Okay, so underneath the alfalfa, as Seth explained, is the compost, and we added the worms. And underneath all of that, on top of the cement, is aeration lines, tile drain lines. So there's air flowing underneath. There's 4 lines going through there to see that it stays aerobic. Because if it goes anaerobic, it makes alcohol. And as we know from last night at Black Lake, if you bring alcohol in with NaCd, nothing good's going to happen, right? So it's that way in the worm world as well. So biology is going to die too. The worm population is going to die if you let that go anaerobic. So we want this highly microbial. So when we send in the analysis, there's no fertilizer in here. This is workers. These are the workers. And so the overall concept for nutrient management, you're looking at microbes, right here, plus carbon. That would be a source of carbon. We use a real simple one like molasses, but there's lots of different types of carbon, wet or dry, that you can use. So if you have workers, they got to have food. So the food is the carbon. When you hear carbon, always think food. And then the third aspect is nutrient if you need it. And we use plant sap analysis, where you actually send in the plant sap, the leaf, and you send it into the lab. And if we send it in on a Monday, Seth, I think by what, Thursday or Friday?
End of Wednesday, early Thursday.
We'll have the analysis back, and you know, and the plant is the end user, so then you know how you're doing, right? And then you can prepare a foliar if you need that. And so this gives us a pretty good supply. We've had it inside, and you know, as long as you don't have the sun get at it, don't add air, don't add food, then it stays dormant. And there is no odor. If there's an odor, you have a problem in the chain somewheres, right? So you have that type scenario. So the goal is for that seed to germinate in a high microbial environment. That's a different plant signal than when it's germinating in a dead soil. There's a difference, right? So it kind of gives you some idea. Then in addition, in the high tunnel, if we have aphids, we'll take some of the juice and add some molasses, and we'll do a drench on the plants. That'll make the aphids go away. So you're not killing anything, but they can't digest a high brix diet. Okay, they're not able to do that, and so you.
I don't understand the concept. What's the difference between that, or if you were just turn that into compost? What?
It's already compost when it goes on the pad. Now it's becoming vermicompost, so it's going through the stomach of a worm. And then the leachate is coming into here.
I also think it helps to extend, you know, that little bit of compost we'd only do, you know, that wouldn't even fill our spreader, whereas the amount of leachate we get is enough for.
Maybe explain to them that this is scalable in larger.
Okay, so that's a good point. So this amount of compost would do one field maybe for us,
Right,
Seth.
solid compost.
So maybe it would do 10, 20 acres. But if you extract the liquid biology out of it, you probably could inoculate all the seed every spring in Burley County. There's a scalable difference. Love spreading the compost, but how do you make enough compost for a large farm, for acreage? You can get some acres out of it, don't get me wrong, but you got to have access to a lot of organic material. And we're not going to take that off of our own cropland, because that would be counterproductive. We'd take it off of yours, right? And use it here, but we don't take it off of our own, okay? So.
How do you determine when this is sufficient time has passed that it's not contributing any further valuable product?
Oh, if you no longer had if we had a clear container here, I'd put some in. When you have that nice rich color, it's still really good. If it starts to lose its color, yep, that'll do. Thank you, Ian. You can always count on Minnesota people, right? Okay, so I like that color, so I go a lot by color. And then we send the analysis in every year also. And so the Molecular Research DNA Lab in Shallowater, Texas, there's a manager there, Scott Dowd, has run that plant for a while. And he can do a really nice job, give you a printout of everything that's alive in there, everything that has DNA in there. But that color, and I can hand that around if you want to smell it. you're probably not going to smell anything.
What I wanted to ask
Yes.
was, when you say you do a foliar,
Yes.
when you say you do
Yes.
a foliar, what I wanted to know is like your rate of application. Is it just straight that goes
Okay,
under?
okay, so it's just a sprinkler can that holds maybe a gallon of leachate, and we're going to put in maybe half a cup or so of molasses in there, and then we're going to spray it on as a foliar right in the high tunnel. Yeah, and that'll artificially raise the Brix level of the plant. Okay, the Brix level, the sugar level. Okay, when that gets higher, the insect world has a hard time digesting that. That's why a healthy crop is always left alone, but a poor crop, the insects are going to take it.
So in that container, about a gallon, you put about a half cup of molasses.
That would be plenty, I think. Yeah. Yes, sir?
How often do you have to take out of here? I mean, it looks pretty full, so if you had an inch of rain today, would this overflow?
Yeah. So what we typically do now that we've got the foliar applications done, I usually pump it down a bit, a foot or so. I'll pump it over onto the compost. And so I pumped it over onto the compost we were making, and then the next day it rained, and it was just mushrooms. So there's a lot of life there. You're fostering life. Yeah.
Second question.
Yes.
Your compost, what is it? I mean, where do you get it? Is it
Okay, Seth's going to talk about that if he agrees to pull me out of here. I'm serious. Somebody give me a hand.
He didn't agree to pull you out.
No, he wasn't going to pull me out. Compost and what it consists of.
Yep. So the question was, what does our compost consist of? And this is kind of a two-part question out of one. But first, the ingredients. We get some straw hay from rye, so it's rye straw. That's a big ingredient, or from an organic producer. We do put a little bit of alfalfa hay in, not a lot, but just if we have some extra sitting around. A little bit of grass hay, wood chips, a little bit of biochar, a little bit of molybdenum, which would be like crushed drywall, wet dairy manure from the last dairy in Burleigh County, and then we also get a little bit of dry manure from our neighbor across the road over here. Occasionally we'll get some fish. They trap carp out of Long Lake up here, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife will bring those fish, and we'll add those to our compost. When that's available, we certainly do take that. We actually also get a little bit of spent grain from Black Leg Ranch Brewery. They're spent grain that they're done after everything's been brewed. We'll add to our compost as well. So those are kind of the main ingredients. But I think more importantly, to add on to that is when you're going to build compost, you kind of want to know where your ingredients are coming from. And if you can get your ingredients from immediately from here, that's best. But as long as you know where you're getting it from, as long as it's somewhere near the area, kind of same ecological site, if you will, that's kind of the more important to us, that we know where our stuff's coming from and that it's coming from our area. We try to keep everything, the biological life and things local, if we can, to the area. So.
Tell me more about your aeration. Is it static, or do you run pumps to keep things aerated through the pipes that you have under the pile?
You're talking of just for this right here. So the question is aeration. How do we keep our vermicompost aerated? So we don't pump any air in. We just have those drain towel lines that Jay was talking about, and they're open, they're exposed on this end, so it does get some airflow through it. But we don't turn it. We do turn it before it's on this pile, but once it's on the pile, it's static. It just gets the air from the tile through it.
So, question for the group: why do we put completed compost on the concrete pad? Why?
So they get started.
They have no teeth. Right? So the worms have no teeth. So they need something partially or completely decomposed, right? They have no teeth. And so that they can consume that decomposed, that completed compost. And they will then consume it all, poop it all out, and you will have vermicompost. All right. So on the compost over that Seth shows you, that windrow over here, the microbes have to eat that entire windrow and poop it out. Well, then it goes on to the concrete pad, and the worms are going to eat the entire amount of it and poop it out. Now it's become vermicompost, really a rich ingredient.
This is a little bit. We have a table to farm composting farm in Durango, and they're collecting food scraps from the restaurant, which include animal protein, and it has to get about 143 degrees, I guess, to deal with that.
So the question was 143 degrees. So when you make compost originally, you're going to go through the thermophilic stage. So you want this to heat up. We usually try to keep it under 160 or so. We're going to turn and add water if we start getting up any higher. And so why is that temperature so important? Think about grilling in the backyard. So you put a hamburger on and you use a meat thermometer. At what temperature are you comfortable to consume that hamburger? Yeah, this guy says 160. That's a little deader than I like. But 160 is safe. On a hamburger, you could probably go a little less than that. And the reason is because when that temperature gets to that point, you have what? Killed all the biology. And now it's safe for your stomach, right? Because it's accustomed to that. Okay? Yes, sir.
Do you buy the worms? Specific variety?
We do buy the worms. They're primarily red wigglers with some European night crawlers for the deeper depths. And so we buy them from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, no relation. But that's where we get them from. You probably have seen it. Yeah, so what's the day today? Is today Tuesday? Okay, you're all in luck. So we're going to go feed the worms, and those who want to can come up on top with me, and we'll put a little bit of watermelon in there. They're hopeless addicts for watermelon. And so we'll go ahead and give them a little bit of watermelon, then we'll get to the next site. So those who want to, they're welcome to step up here if you're physically able and you want to. And if you don't want to, you don't need to, right? Okay. So I'm just going to give them a little treat because it's Tuesday, right? Everybody knows watermelon rind on Tuesday, right? Okay, so you can take a peek here, right? You're a young, strong guy. So there they are.
Oh yeah.
Describe it.
There is a large clump of them. They're all together. There was at the highest point of the watermelon. There's some still attached to the watermelon, but there must be hundreds of them. Can I grab them?
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of them in there.
Show everybody behind you, Wes.
Last Tuesday they had some melon.
Okay, and that's where the worms are.
Alright, go, sorry, Wes, freaky resource, sorry, gotta get it. Alright, thank you.
And in addition, there's some toads in the same place because it fosters life.
There's also grubs down there.
So there's grubs, there's worms, there's toads, everything. It's life.
Check it out. I got my shot.
Okay, so we'll go to the next one here. So we cover it, right? We cover it. These are drip lines. If it doesn't rain for quite a while, we give them a little bit of water. Okay, so we'll go to another one here. So we need a different volunteer than the guy we just had. We got another volunteer. Anyone physically able? There you go. So what do we got?
Ooh, that's a lot of worm.
Tell them. Go ahead.
That's a lot of worm right in there. You guys want to see it? Right there. No, you come up here.
So do you do this every week?
Yes. You don't have to.
Do they know the days of the week? It's
Yes, they know the days of the week. Tuesday's watermelon day. Now, when they consume this, this is last times. They'll consume it all except the thin skin. Why? They have no teeth, right? They have no teeth. You got to keep that in mind.
To watermelon wine then?
The watermelon wine would go over really well here. Yes. Okay, we'll do one more and then we keep it moving. Okay, somebody who hasn't been up yet that would like to?
I'll do it for you.
All right.
Oh, hence the flags. I didn't realize that's your flags.
Oh yeah, there. Are we getting close? Okay. Okay, here. Okay, I'll open it up for
Okay.
you.
Oh, isn't it beautiful? Oh, look at that. I
No,
love
no,
it.
you have to talk.
Oh. It's amazing. It is amazing.
Talk,
that it-
talk.
I'm not a good narrator. It's just, that is awesome.
Yeah, grab a handful if you like. So you got to keep in mind they don't like the sunlight, so they shrink down as soon as you open it up. But I think even people from Texas probably could get a good
My
feel
daughter
for it.
does this.
There you go.
My daughter does
There you go.
horticulture.
There you go.
So you just do one per
Yep.
spot?
Yep. You can't spoil them. Don't want to spoil them. Okay. We got it.
Stay right there, or are they all the way through here?
Say again.
Do the worms stay right there?
They spread out pretty good, but if you keep feeding them too much, they want to just, because that's preferred over the compost. They really like the watermelon. But when there's a group coming, I usually feed them a few days in advance. That way they can see them. Yeah.
So whatever, like if you dug down here, you could probably
Go for it.
you could probably find something.
You probably can. Yeah, go for it. Okay, we're going to walk this way.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to talk to you about the high tunnel and what we're doing in there. Most of the plants that we grow in there is based off of this book. It's called Carrots Love Tomatoes. It's about companion gardening, growing things together that like each other, and then there's things in there that don't like each other, so it saves a lot of heartache, headache, whatever. There's also got a lot of good information about herbs, because we use a lot of herbs out here with our plants. I can show you the book after. So anyway, in the high tunnel, when I'm all done talking, we're going to have you guys walk through. It's very warm in there. It's easier to talk out here because it's a large group, but we've got lots of combination plantings in there. Our muskmelon is the first one up. We have 3 kinds of dry beans in the high tunnel. We have pinto, kidney, and then we have a soup or a chili bean. If you plant radish with your beans, it'll promote strong bean growth. We have some marigolds with the beans, and that kind of repels some pests. We have a bed of just solid flowers in there just to attract pollinators into the high tunnel. We have a bed of carrots, 2 rows of carrots, and then we have chives, onions, and leeks down the middle. And those chives, onions, and leeks will repel the carrot fly, so they keep the carrots healthy. We had beets. We've already harvested them, but we had leeks running down the middle of our beet bed. Leeks will repel aphids, and they also improve the flavor of your beets. And then we have onions and chamomile. If you plant chamomile with your onions, you got to do it sparingly. Like every 200 feet of onions, have 1 plant, but that improves the quality and the flavor of your onions. We have leeks and Swiss chard, and there again the leeks repel pests. We've taken our 5th cutting off the Swiss chard. It really likes the high tunnel, the heat in there. We have tomatoes and basil and lemon balm planted together. The basil improves the quality and the flavor of the tomatoes, and so does the lemon balm. And then we have peppers with basil for those same reasons. Trying to think what I'm forgetting. Yep, we have the flowers, yes. And we have trees in the high tunnel, but they're kind of struggling a little bit, I think. We didn't put a shade cloth on the high tunnel this year just because we wanted to see if we could get our trees to blossom. This is like probably the second, third summer the trees have been in the high tunnel, and they just weren't blossoming, so we took the shade cloth off, and they did blossom, but it's just, I think, a little too warm. But we just wanted to try it. We have lots of frogs in there, as well as out here from our last few rains, which is really nice. We have, Jaden wanted to try a salsa bed in there, so we have a couple Roma tomatoes, we have jalapeno peppers, we have bell peppers, we have onions, cilantro, and chives. So all that's planted in one bed. So it looks pretty cool. And everything in the high tunnel grows faster, bigger. It's just a very quick way to get produce. And speaking of the produce, all the produce from the high tunnel and the outdoor garden go to Heaven's Helpers Soup Cafe in Bismarck. That's for people who are homeless and just kind of down on their luck, and they're always very appreciative to get all the produce. We have sweet corn and potatoes out here, and so we take everything into town. Yeah, I will. We have a rotation that we're trying now in the high tunnel because we do that on our field, so we thought we should apply it in there as well. So we are working on that. It's a 4-year rotation, so we're just getting started on that. When each of the beds is harvested, then we basically seed a cover crop, a multi-species cover crop, into the beds, and we let that grow until it freezes in the fall. And then it's there over winter, and then in the spring, about 10 days before we want to plant, then we take landscaping fabric, about several layers of it, and we lay it over the beds and basically smother the cover crops. And then we take that off and we plant right into it. Some years, if we have a lot of cover on the beds, we have to kind of give it a little bit of a haircut, but otherwise we take a scissor and snip through the residue and plant right into it. And our beds are soil and compost, and we add some compost every year as we're planting. All of our plants and seeds get worm juice applied to them. Like Jay said, if we ever have bugs in there, any kind of fungus or bacterial something or other going on in there, we do put some worm juice and molasses, and that seems to help. You're always going to have always some kind of fungus going on in a high tunnel just because it's so warm and humid in there. We water with drip lines, so that helps a lot. Does anyone have any questions?
Have you had to replace the tarp, and how often?
I think they replaced it a couple.
One time. How many years? We built that in 2012, 2013. It lasted an extremely long time considering the elements that it's exposed to. We replaced it, I believe, 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Just leave it up there in the winter and everything like that?
Yeah, the shade always helps protect it. And so now we have the shade off. I think we need to have a discussion to put the shade back on.
I do too.
Yeah.
I agree with him because I do a lot of my harvesting in there, and you want to just be in there in the morning and then get out of there because it is very warm. But it is very cool. I mean, it's very interesting. You'll see as you go through, some things do better in a high tunnel than others, just like outside.
So this, folks, is our outdoor garden. We got a variety of different things we tried this year. One of the cool things that we got to try out this year is multiple different kinds of mulches. So we have 6 or 7 different types of mulches. If you look kind of in the main part of the garden, that's actually a paper, something very similar that we probably all would have used back in the day in kindergarten for construction paper, projects like that. Comes in a 4-foot roll by 250 feet long. We really like this mulch. It's done a great job for us. The one main thing with it is we put compost on the edges just to hold it down. I don't know if you guys noticed, but North Dakota here, we're a little windy from time to time, so it's really important to hold that mulch down. But one of the coolest things about this one is it becomes food. So it'll break down, it's providing carbon for our soil, for our microbes. So we really like this mulch. It was a lot of work putting it down, but it did great for us. The next kind of mulch we're going to talk about, right down by Tokina, we got plastic mulch. She's the one down there waving her hand. So we did that with our watermelon. I got this idea from NDSU Extension. They actually said that's probably the best way to grow a watermelon in North Dakota. We're kind of giving it the high tunnel effect a little bit, but just on the root system. So they really like heat, they really like water, and up in our climate, we don't have a lot of growing days, so that's just another opportunity that we can get it to flourish a little bit better. To the left of that, we have no-dig potatoes. So who here has ever tried no-dig potatoes or even heard of no-dig potatoes?
I haven't never heard of.
Few of you. Okay. Well, for those that you haven't, we'll go through it. So no-dig potatoes is really an easy way. There's no tillage involved. How you start off in the spring, you lay your potatoes on the ground in rows. We can walk down there too. Yeah, let's just mosey on that way and we'll have a little conversation about how we do it. All right, so our first question, we were asked how far did we bury them into the soil? Well, we didn't. We set them right on top of the soil. Next, we take alfalfa. You could use straw as well. We prefer alfalfa because, like I mentioned, the wind. Alfalfa is a lot more dense. It's not going to pick up as easy. Straw is really light and fluffy. Another reason we go with alfalfa is the carbon-nitrogen ratio. Alfalfa is about 30-to-1, where straw is about 80-to-1. So this is going to break down a lot quicker. It's going to provide some more nitrogen for us as well. So we'll lay alfalfa on top of our potato cuttings. We'll go about anywhere from 6 to 8 inches roughly, and then we'll water it thoroughly. The best part about no-dig potatoes is in the fall, especially because I'm getting a little older now. I'm not as spry as I once was back in the high school years. You don't have to dig. All you do when it comes to harvesting them, you start off, you grab a plant, you pull it up, the tubers will come right with it, and then after you've pulled up all your plants, got the tubers off the roots of the potatoes, you just sift through the hay for any that may have fallen off. So it's just another great opportunity. Once again, we're putting conservation on the ground. We don't have to till, great things like that. Another benefit of no-dig potatoes is this spot will be the most fertile spot in the garden next year because of the alfalfa. If you don't believe me, I can actually show you. Behind me, you can see this corn. The furthest west row, so the row of corn that's closest to you, was not on the alfalfa. The next three were. And there's about a 2-foot height difference between the two. So that also shows how fertile that this can just put those minerals and nutrients back into your soil. So now that we're on the corn, and we'll talk a little bit about this, how many of you have heard of Three Sisters? Quite a few of you, right? Well, this is our take on it. We've actually added a fourth sister to the mix. So we have, a stepsister, if you will. And it really is, because it's field peas, it's not sweet peas. So it is actually stepsister. So we've taken our sweet corn, we've mixed them with pole beans. We have a 2-row planter. So we'll hook it to the tractor, we'll go down the row, we'll plant our corn first. And it's an old 7000 series John Deere. So after that, we'll swap out the cups, we'll put the bean cups on it. And then we'll come back, we'll plant our peas and pole beans. We mix those together. And then in addition, we added our pumpkins and squash on the outside and we're training them to grow in. The whole theory to that is it might make it a little bit easier to harvest. It's not such a jungle while you're walking through, tripping over vines and that type of a thing. So there is some squash and gourds growing in there. That's all volunteer. And also the gourds on the outside of the potatoes, those are all volunteers. So we've got some good volunteers coming this year too that don't get that all the time. Yes?
Was there any ground preparation at all with the potatoes, or was it like this with grass and stuff?
So the question was there any ground preparation for the potatoes? No, it was essentially exactly like what you're standing on there, sir.
So the question was the nutrients in where you're planting into the hay bales or straw bales. Do you have problems there with nutrients?
Over here?
Yeah. Where you're planting in, just because the straw, like you said, is more carbon than.
Sure. So there will be a little clarification. This is actually a raised bed. It's not straw bale gardening over here. So there's compost and soil mixed. One of the reasons that we added a raised bed just to border our garden is because this is some of the toughest soils on the whole Menoken farm site. And we thought, why not throw a garden on that, right? This was used for years as a staging area for compost. So we had heavy equipment, lots of traffic, so it's very compacted, it's hard ground. So that's one of the biggest reasons we can add the raised bed is we get to control the type of soil, the texture that's in it. And one of the reasons we did that is for the sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes don't like hard compacted ground. They like a loose soil to put off their tubers in.
So you just have hay bales or?
Yep, the hay bales are just the border.
They're just the border, okay. Because I was like,
Yes.
you're walking all over your cucumber, your watermelon plant.
What's that?
I said you're walking all over the
Oh.
watermelon plant. And the other thing, when you plant potatoes, do you cut them up in just the eyes, or you plant a whole potato for each plant?
Okay, so the question is, do we plant potatoes? Do we do the whole potato or cut it up and do the eyes? So the answer is we actually pre-cut our potatoes. So first off, in order to do that, you got to go ahead and age the seed. There's lots of different resources on that. So the reason you would pre-cut is to age that seed a little bit. So to get it more mature, what that'll give you is more even emergence. So depending on when we go buy seed potatoes, we'll kind of age them. We'll kind of look at some pictures, compare, and figure out whether they need to be cut a month in advance, 2 weeks, or the day of, based on how old your seed potato stock is. If you cut it too early and it's an older seed, that can also cause issues like no potato top. So you really, if you're going to do it, you really want to do some research. You want to look into it just to be able to judge that yourself. But yes, we pre-cut our potatoes, we let it heal, and then we seeded our cuttings throughout. So each one we were about anywhere from a foot by a foot to 18 inches for spacing.
What do you do with your harvests from these gardens?
So what we do from our harvest for this garden, there's a couple different things. The main thing we do is we'll actually donate it to the Soup Cafe in town. Another thing that we've really kind of started to dive into, has anyone here heard of Dan Kittredge? So he is the leader with the Bionutrient Food Association. So what Dan is doing, he's a scientist, he's trying to create a zapper, for lack of a better term. What it is a spectrometer that everybody will be able to take into the grocery store, shine it on their product, whether it's potatoes, carrots, whatever, and it'll spit back a nutrient density at you. Because it's not all the same, folks. It's all different. There's lots of science to back this up. Just because your bag of carrots says that it's got so much protein in it, it may not be true. And the best thing that he even says is you can taste the difference. That's the number one test, is the taste. So I know I've personally tasted in the same bag of carrots. One's woody and the next one's the sweetest thing you ever had. Well, so we're kind of doing some looking into that. So we're sending some of our samples off to see what the difference is. And truly, what we grow ourselves, is that better than what you can get from the local supermarket?
Okay, folks, how many of you are familiar with Xerxes Society? Xerxes Society? Okay. So when they were here a few years ago, they talked about a beetle bank. And of course, you all have a beetle bank already, so this is all old hat to you, I understand. Okay. No, I'm just funning with you a little bit. Okay, so a beetle bank has a raise in the center. So there's a little raise in here. So as you walk to the center, it's up a little bit, all right? And so the thought on that is, and I'm going off of Xerxes Society's recipe here, the thought on that is, so the water in the spring drains away from these warm season clump grasses. And the beetles complete their life processes in them. And it's also an overwintering site. Because you get this large, these are all clump grasses, you get this large sward, okay? And it's what you're looking for. And so we lost a lot of our acres of native rangeland, so when you lose that, you lose the home for a lot of other critters, okay? So we decided to amend it a little bit and add 5 local forbs. So we went to our NRCS Plant Material Center, said give us kind of a top 5 forbs, okay, which they did. And then of course we went and got the top 5 native warm season grasses, okay. And so, you know, things like side oats, switch, big blue, little blue, Indian, and all of these they're us. This is what's always been here. And so we put the fabric down to get them established. Last summer, Jenny and I planted them as plugs. And we got them out of Watertown, South Dakota, Big Sioux Nursery, Daryl, sound right? Big Sioux Nursery, you buy them by the flat. And there must be about 90 plants in a flat, roughly. And so we planted them as plugs, and by the end of the year, they were starting to either head out or blossom, okay? And so now you got them on this little bit of a raise. We got some fabric down here for weed control till we get them established, and then we hope to take that off. Okay, Jenny, come on up.
I was answering questions in the high tunnel.
You weren't answering questions in the high tunnel. You were, I know how this game works. So
I was hiding in the spiffy bit.
You were hiding in the spiffy bit. So Jenny is my partner in crime on this initially when we sat down here and started to plant them. So after we got the plugs in, we hand watered them a few times. And it was dry last year, so we did do some hand watering. Since then, this spring, we augmented them with a little bit of green needlegrass. So if you find one of these, like so, we added a little green needlegrass, okay? And so consequently, once they're established, we'll see no reason to water them. It'd be like watering your native rangeland, right? There's no point in that. And so they're adapted, they're very resilient with a huge root system, okay? So now we have the flowering plants and we have the warm season plants, and now we'll let them start to fill in the raised area, and we have the beetle bank. Now if you choose to, you can take a few of these and put them in your backyard. Instead of a beetle bank, and we talked about this earlier, you got a beetle bump, right? So you can have a beetle bump. But think about that in your own conservation districts and the impact that can make in a small area. Huge, huge impacts in small areas. So Jenny, if you would maybe describe a little bit some of the plants as well, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, like I said up there, you know, there's 5 native forbs and 5 native grasses. This one, this really tall one, it looks like a turkey foot. That's big blue stem. So that's really done well. Someone was asking about Indian grass. That is beautiful, I think. Then this one is side oats grama and switchgrass. And then we have little blue stem. And then we have the purple coneflower, black Samson, echinacea. We have smooth blue aster. The wild bergamot with all the purple, that's really liking it back here. And then we have the purple prairie clover, like right here. That's the one the rabbits really like. So we did have to replace a few of them. And this one, the meadow, I'm trying to think, blazing star.
Which we don't know what the color is going to be.
Right, that's the one we haven't seen flower yet, but everything else, you know, is this one has like a little purplish blue flower. It's just loaded with them. But this is a way better soil down here, so everything is more advanced.
Is this Liatris?
In that family, yes.
It's a native here, though?
Yes, this one is. Because, you know, you have the gay feather in your pastures, that's probably so tall.
Yeah.
And then I have Liatris in my yard that is blooming now, and it's about so tall, and this is getting even taller and bigger, way bigger.
What are the advantages to the beetle?
They're part of life. So the question was, what are the advantages to the beetles? So in our environment, and I'm just gonna go honest with you here. In our environment, we've taken everything off the landscape. We took out the tree rows. We took out the fence lines. We took out the native grass. The rock piles. The old farmsteads. We've simplified the crop rotation from 5 or 6 down to 1 or 2. We've done all this. So what do you think happened to life along the way? it kind of died. And then we get a whole generation of people that aren't used to seeing it. And now what can we do to build it back? Well, you got to start with a green plant. It's always food and a home. Food and a home. They're like me. I got to have those two things. And so you start looking at, okay, let's build it back. And I think that's really critical. I think we got to quit talking about enhancing carbon and first go ahead and do the foundational work to even get to that point. Cranky old German heritage guy. Okay.
It's called a beetle bank for its, originally it was planted for the pest management aspects of. Hello everyone. Many of you may know me as Ariel Rivers, Director of Membership Engagement for NACD, but little known fact, I also happen to be Dr. Ariel Rivers, who had a PhD in entomology as well at one point in time. And I actually studied pest management in corn and soybean rotations. So beetle bank, to answer your question, Jody, when Xerxes started looking at it initially, there was this huge question of not only all of this, how do we provide additional habitat for many other creatures, but specifically ones, because we're humans and we think about the utility to humans, specifically for insects or other creatures that might provide some utility in the agro ecosystem. Beetles are one of the most beneficial as they provide countless benefits in terms of pest management. I don't know which one I'm supposed to hold, and I'm a wavy hand person, so it's so hard for me to not move my hands. So beetles especially, there are so many species, 40,000 in fact, and they not only provide, that's just one family that I studied, I should say, 40,000 carabids. They specifically eat insect eggs of pests, they eat caterpillars that are pests, et cetera, et cetera. So beetle banks, when you increase the diversity, as Jay was saying, of multiple layers of habitat within the roots, et cetera, you're starting to bring some of those beetles back that can contribute to pest management, but then you get the added benefits of the pollinators, the decomposers, the rest of the soil life that's contributing to bringing in those other additional beneficial insects as well. So hopefully that helps in the beetle bank.
Brought out the PhD.
And, and that's exactly what I just said. So. There you go. There you go. So ultimately, you bring it all together, and you start to get everything from edge effect to different land uses. So you build back your environment. Okay. So, any last questions? Yes, sir.
If you was a farmer and wanted to make one of these beetle banks,
Right.
where would you tell them they need to put it?
Well, you could go right down the middle of a cropland field. If you had irrigation, you could go to a corner. You can always find a nook or a cranny. Daryl, did you want to?
Put it in your yard.
Yeah.
Really, I farm
have
and ranch
them.
right up here, 25 miles. I've started a beetle bank, beetle bump, if you will. It's not a full bank, but it's bigger than a bump. I haven't come up with a term yet.
How big does it have to be?
It's a no.
I think any place is a good place to start.
Exactly.
But when you do it, it's nice so that you can expand it a little bit each year if you want to. So that's what I like about this. We can keep growing a little bit. It's not so overwhelming to do it in 1 year. And then the plugs, I don't know, Jenny, how many plugs did we have die in here? I don't know if any died.
The rabbits.
The rabbits, but as far as just establishment, probably not.
So are you guys going to extend it? Like when you take off the tarp or the fabric?
We have that opportunity and that option. How far we're going to go, I don't know. It's a pretty good start. Yeah.
From last year, spring,
Yep.
to this year?
Yeah. Actually, midsummer from what, into June?
Yeah, towards the end of June, early July, we planted all these.
This is 1 year.
How long is the grow season here?
Oh,
First
we
frost
go
is the
way
15th
into January, February.
Oh, yeah.
The first frost is generally September 15th, and it gets warm enough so it doesn't freeze probably the 15th of May.
But keep in mind, our days are very long.
Yeah,
So we have a lot of sunlight per day, but the
We
season
will.
is shorter.
We have some, you're going to see we have some weeding to do in here. That's, I'm on my list. That's on my list for tomorrow.
So Jay, Seth said about how you want the ingredients for your compost to be local. Can't we just go buy biologicals from China or something?
Yeah, I think biologicals from China, critical minerals from China. I think those are all good ideas.
Take a deep breath, everybody.
Makes me nervous.
And we try to do everything local here. We try to use all local products because they're adapted, and our biology is adapted to that, and that just makes sense. It's your neck of the woods.
One thing too, we fight a lot of field bindweed out here, and this fabric helps a lot. Last year we had way more coming up through the holes with the plants, but this year I don't see as near as much, but the fabric does help a ton.
Yeah, good. Thanks for baiting me like that, Ian. That was much appreciated. But I know exactly what you're saying, and so we've had these conversations many times. We're not interested in buying a biological because we don't know where that comes from. That could be anywheres. But for us here, if we use all local products, then we got a good situation.
And the living root and the other soil health principles are what you need for
Exactly.
soil biology.
Exactly. Yeah. Living plant. It always starts with a living plant. You can't harvest carbon without a green plant, which is an excellent segue to our last stop.
Yeah.
So we're on field 1. This is going to conclude our walking field tour, and we'll be heading back to the tent for a break right after this. But I wanted to talk to you briefly about a couple things, and one of them being the 4 parts of carbon. So in my career, I went backwards on my career. I ended up finally understanding a little bit about carbon at the end, but I was hoping I could have got that 40 some years earlier. But at that time, I couldn't unravel it. Okay? So it's a process as you work through it. So when we talk about carbon, I want to give you some thoughts on carbon. So when you go home and you have these conversations at a board meeting or a public meeting or just meeting with somebody, how does this whole carbon scenario work? Well, the first thing I want you to understand is in the first 4 to 8 weeks of a green plant's life, it'll put an exudate into the soil. The first 4 to 8 weeks of a green plant's life, it'll put an and that's the sugar. It'll put a sugar exudate, the carbon, into the soil. Who's going to eat that food? The biology, exactly. And they will form the association with the plant. That has been forever, right? That's been forever. So that's one thing you want to understand in terms of carbon, is that exudate. Now, at the end of 4 to 8 weeks, it's going to start to reverse. That energy is going to go into what? It wants to make seed. It wants to reproduce. But initially, it has to establish the relationship, okay? But what after, let's just say after 6 to 8 weeks, I came in and I grazed it lightly across the top. And the plant had to regrow. What did I do then?
You disrupted food sources.
I disrupted that cycle, and it's actually going to put out some more exudates and it's going to regrow. Right? So I can use livestock to maybe get a little bit more out of this. Okay? Got to have water. You got to have water in the soil to get that regrowth. If you're drier than dry, that's probably not going to happen. But if you have moisture, then you got sunlight. Okay. So there's one part of carbon. Everyone's got that part, right? Yes? Okay. So a second part of carbon, I want you to understand, residue on the surface. There's carbon in this material. Where is it going to go? It's mostly going to go to the atmosphere. The vast majority of it. All right? Probably 85%. Depends on rainfall, depends on how active your biology is in the soil where it's touching. But most of it will go to the atmosphere. The vast majority. It's your armor. It's the protection of the soil. It's to prevent wind and water erosion and moderate temperatures. It helps to moderate those temperatures. It also, if you have enough of it, creates a little environment under the cover for critters, whether it's a beetle or anything else. Okay? So we start to understand that second part of carbon. Most of that old residue is going to go to the atmosphere, the majority of it. Okay, so if you take a corn plant, we're going to take corn. I know most of you don't understand what that crop is where you live, but that's just a joke. Okay, sweet corn. Okay, that sweet corn will work, or field corn. So if you take a corn plant, a third of the carbon that it's going to produce is in the grain. A third of the carbon is in the residue, above ground residue. And a third of the carbon is in the root mass. Okay? Now, the part that's going to be in the above ground residue after harvest and lay on the soil surface, like this straw does, is going to go to the atmosphere. About 85%. In the root mass, that third, the vast majority of that will also go to the atmosphere, but not as much. You're maybe going to have 75% of that go to the atmosphere instead of the surface. Okay, so neither one a huge amount. And then there's carbon in the grain, but we're going to put wheels under it. It's going to have tires under it, and it's going to leave the field, right? So that part's gone. So you're going to get a small amount from the above ground residue, a little bit bigger amount in the root mass, but you're probably going to get the most active portion initially when that plant starts to grow in that first 4 to 8 weeks of its life, because it's giving off the exudate. It's giving off the carbon. Okay, the 4 parts of carbon. Think about those always when you're dealing, whether you're dealing in gardening, dealing in a cover crop, whatever it is. Now the cover crop combination brings you another opportunity. Why don't we have one plant in here? Why didn't we just plant one item? It's a lot simpler, right? Why didn't we go with just one plant? Because they all have different exudates. When we had native rangeland here, we had 100 different species. We went to cropland, and across the field here we have 1 exudate. So when you use a cover crop like this, it's your opportunity to increase diversity. Okay? And so the other thing about increasing diversity, it's safer to graze. It's a way safer grazing than when it's a monoculture. Because the critter will select, right? The critter will select. It knows way more than you do about its needs. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. But I wanted to go over the carbon situation because of those 4 parts. Everyone here understands them, right? Okay. So another item I wanted to throw out here about how difficult it is to hold on to carbon. So on this field at one time was in a 5-year rotational managed grazed rotation. So it was perennials for 5 years, managed grazed. During that period of time, I measure soil organic matter via soil tests twice a year on every field here. So at the end of 5 years, I gained 0.5 to 3/4% of carbon. That's a lot. In our environment, that's a lot. At the end of 5 years, look at what it did. Well, then it went to cropland again. We converted back to cropland. By the end of the 3rd year of cropland, I had lost that gain. So you see, when we're talking about voluntary carbon credits and we're talking about sequestering carbon, it all starts with building a soil aggregate, and that's built on the root mass of a fibrous plant, especially at the point in time when it's giving off the exudates. And so this whole scenario of how we bring this all together, it's going to be one thing to acquire some carbon, it's another to hang on to it. It's not an easy thing. Okay? Especially with the 3 parts of carbon from the viewpoint of the living and the dead and the very dead, or the humus. Okay? Because that first part of carbon is where we accumulate quite quickly, in that living part with the biology. We accumulate the carbon quicker there first. But that's also we lose that portion very easy as well. So it's only when we get to the humus portion it gets real stable. So this whole thing with voluntary carbon credits, you notice some of them are very long term. Some of them are a lot of years. They're talking 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. They're really long term. Why? It's probably going to take that line to get it to humus. So otherwise you quit, you revert back to what you were doing, which as humans happens really easily, and the carbon's not there anymore. So it's rather elusive that way. So Daryl, are we good? Can we go into questions? Yes, sir.
On this mix, how many species mix is it?
Seth, how many species mixed? Do you know?
I believe it's 12 or 13. I believe the species list is about 12 or 13 species. Can you repeat the question?
Cost.
The cost? I off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I've got it written down. Yeah.
Cover crops obviously has gone up, and when you
Sorry, Bill.
cover crops seed has gone up, obviously, like everything else, and what you find is certain species in a mix tend to add cost. I had one individual ask me what something was. There's Phacelia in here for pollinators. It's an excellent for pollinators, and it adds a lot of cost. So this particular mix, we were a little bit over $40 an acre, which it's cheap. That'll make, or not cheap. It'll make you stand up and notice. So I get that, but it's also a mix. There's lots of things that you could do and have cover crops and be half that, or even less or more than half. So this is a Cadillac mix, if you will. It's got all the players.
We knew you were coming.
And we knew you were coming,
Yeah.
and I had an inkling someone would ask. But I'll be straight up and honest. I use this mix a lot at home on our ranch. I can get it back winter grazing and that. This was, I think, at about 35 pounds an acre, wasn't it? I think was, or 39, something like that, which is plenty thick too. Yeah. So.
Does it help if you think of it as an investment?
Oh, there's no question, you know, and it's a mindset, right? And so when you deal in these realms and you think of ecosystem function, maybe Josh talked a little bit about that last night, you know, it's an investment. You know, we talk a lot here in the Menoken farm about short-term economic gain at the expense of the resource. Happens a lot, right? That's kind of our production model. Agriculture is an extraction business by what it is. And so, of course, Jay talks about putting the carbon back. And this is one of the ways. So we'll graze this. Our gains on this will be probably over 2 pounds, I would guess. I mean, just from history at home and what we've done here in the past. And you take that times your livestock cost and stuff, and we'll take a lot of the heartache out of the $40 an acre. But it's a process.
Infiltration.
Let's walk over. Oh, yeah, one more question.
Big component of that is the grazing livestock.
Exactly. Yeah. On this type scenario, it is, because we consider this a full season-long cover crop. Someone like myself, Jerry Doan, where you were at yesterday, we'll winter graze something like this. We're going to graze this probably in October here at the Menoken farm, but at home we graze it in November, December, if Mother Nature allows us to do it. So.
Value to the underground livestock.
Exactly, and we. Right, Ian, and we really haven't put a price on that yet, and I don't know if we understand it enough to know, and so that's where we're at.
Okay, something you can do and your local soil district can do is infiltration. It's not hard to do. So if you take a 6-inch canister like Seth's got here, and there's one edge that's kind of sharp and one edge that's kind of dull. So you want the let's come over a little bit. That looks, is that a track right there? I'm just trying to avoid a tractor track. That looks pretty good right there, Seth. So we're gonna, I usually push it in by hand, but Seth uses a block of wood and a hammer, you know, but if I'm doing, no, I'm just funning with you. Yeah, who's smarter? So you need to put it in 3 inches. So you want it in the soil 3 inches. I worked for USDA for 40 years, and if I was going to record it for USDA, I would do 5 of those. And then you record the 2nd inch. But for today, I'm just going to show a concept, okay? And when you do 5 of them, you throw out the high and the low, and you average the remaining 3, and you might get accepted. Your data might be accepted. Okay, but for today, we're just using it for comparison's sake. And so an inch of water in the 6-inch container is about 444 mils. So a water bottle, hold that up, Seth. A water bottle is usually 500. So you might have to take a drink, right? Take one swig out of it. Then you'll have 444 mils remaining. Now, if you don't have residue on the surface, you want to cover it with saran wrap. Okay, if you don't have residue on the surface, you want to cover it with saran wrap and pour the water on the saran wrap. The reason for that is it'll slake those microscopic holes shut just from you pouring the water in. Okay, so you want to give it a good test, right? So you want it realistic as you can make it. And so Seth's going to pour it on the residue. So we need somebody with a magical phone. Okay, and so Seth's going to pour it in. Ian's going to measure. So before, yeah, you can go ahead. You can go ahead and okay, he's pouring. And so we're going to record the amount of time, and it gives you some idea when you do this again on another field of the same soil type. Okay, it's a fine sandy loam. And so, you know, I used to do this a lot on different clients' places. I would do their infiltration and we'd make a change, like maybe a no-till system or maybe a cover crop or something like that. And then you could do this again down the road and get an idea. Did it improve? All right? Because in the 80s and 90s, we couldn't get water in the soil. It just ran off. And then I'd build a waterway or I'd build a diversion because we couldn't get water in the soil. So how does water get in the soil? Anyone?
Pore spaces.
Pore spaces. Who builds the pore spaces? The biology does. What do they use for food? The sugars. The carbon. They're always consuming the carbon. How long does a soil aggregate last? Yeah, they're only going to go maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. So you're always building and rebuilding soil aggregates. If you're a farmer, rancher, gardener, you will build and rebuild them forever. Forever. Okay? So, okay.
We're getting close, Jay.
You're getting close. So in Montana, I worked in Montana a number of times, and we're at Chester, Montana on the High Line, and we're doing this demonstration right here, and it was raining, and the rain was coming into the ring faster than the water was leaving. In Chester, Montana, and that was after a half hour of the Montanans telling me how dry it is. And it's the only time I ever had that. I had more water coming in than was leaving as it was raining. Okay, what do you got?
Minute 44.
Okay, minute 44. So, if I was gonna record this, you always record the 2nd inch. Okay, we're not gonna do it today, but the 2nd inch is the one you want because the 1st inch sets the stage. Okay? So you're always uniform. So wherever you go and you do this, that 1st inch sets the stage, and then the 2nd inch is what you record. And then if you have 5, throw out the high and the low, average the other 2. Pop it out, please, if you would, Seth. And then you always want to dig it out. And you always want to take a look and see if it's uniformly wet across the ring. Okay? So let's...
And Jay, when you say five locations,
yes.
not 5 inches in a row.
No, we're looking at trying to avoid wheel tracks. If it was a row crop, if I were in a cornfield, I would do some in the row between the plants. I would do some between the rows. And you spread them out. Invariably, you're going to hit a tractor tire somewhere. Invariably. And so that was the value of that. So take a look here now. Do you see this? See how wet that is? And see how wet it is here? Let's see if you can hold that up a little bit and we can rotate it a little bit. And see how dry it is in the center? The water went where the pore spaces were and where the macropores were. Macropores are made by a worm or made by a taproot. They died in place, those type things. Okay, so do we have work to do here? Yes, it's not uniformly wet all the way across.
Then you start to understand what's happening in your field or what isn't happening. And then you can make your change. Now all of a sudden you start to understand why you put in a multi-species cover crop mix. It'll improve this infiltration. It'll sequester some carbon. It'll do those things. Is there a cost to it? Always. Always. Questions on infiltration? Everyone's comfortable to go home and do infiltration? Right? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But always check it at the end. Always pop it out, take a look. Remember, you need 444 mils, 6-inch container, put it 3 inches into the ground. If you want me to do it for you, I push it in by hand, but you can use a block of wood if you want to. Well, you've been a great group on the tour today. We're going to go back to the tent, take a little break. Appreciate your attention. Appreciate what you do. Thank you.